Greetings and welcome to the Pure Report. I'm your host, Rob Ludeman. It is time to bring the orange. And as you can see, we've got a lot of orange in this episode. I'm welcoming Ken Hui from our Unstructured Data Field Solution Architect team. Ken, you're in town. It's great to get you in the studio.
Yeah, great to be here. This is a great looking studio, by the way.
We're having a lot of fun with it. A lot of episodes, a lot of demand, which I'm very happy with. And we're happy you're here as well.
Thank you.
You joined Pure somewhat recently, but have a nice, long, storied career. And
Yes.
Don't interpret that I'm saying you're old. Like,
Okay, I say that about myself.
I do as well. But talk about how it's been at Pure so far for you. How's the experience been?
Yeah, it's been great. It's I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but one of the things I love is about the culture.
Yeah.
And not only the culture in terms of a technology standpoint, but just of the people.
Yeah.
That it's one of those rare places where no matter who you are, who you talk, where how high their position is, people are friendly and people want to help. There isn't really anybody who goes, well, who are you?
Yeah.
You know, are you a level 6, level 7? Can't talk to you. You're a level or 2 below me.
Do you experience that in some other places that you
Uh,
worked in the
I've
past
been,
a little hierarchical stuff?
I've been in a few places where,
Yeah.
that people care about those types of things, I would say.
Yeah, which doesn't matter. And I agree with you. That's one of the reasons I've been here coming up on 8 years, or 8 years by the time we publish this. And I've always loved that accessibility. And I even go back to remembering my first 2 or 3 months sitting in all hands meetings where Kaz and Charlie were just standing up in front of everybody, taking questions, and they were answering things that I was like, whoa, they were answering these for everybody at the company. It was just amazing.
Yeah, it's great. We had Narav and who heads, the SCs globally,
Yeah.
and Phil, who heads SCs in Americas, and they've up there just sharing the mistakes they've made.
Yeah.
Times where they failed, and how they learned from that, and that's just really refreshing to have leaders who are willing to admit, we don't have all the answers, and we're not perfect leaders.
That's right. Yeah, vulnerability, but also that old Steve Jobs quote: "We don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people to tell us what to do." Right? I always love that quote. What brought you to Pure? I know you've navigated a storied career, as I said, in a number of different places, both storage and in the cloud space. But what was it that was attractive about this to you, besides the culture that you already mentioned?
Yeah, it was interesting. I've been so it's been 5 years since I did anything related to storage or backups, and really 10 years since I've done like hard production storage type work.
Yeah.
I'm mostly been in the cloud space. We can talk about that later. But I just wanted to, it was time for a change. I felt like I wanted to do something a little different, and I wanted an opportunity to kind of go back to my roots a bit in the storage space. And when I did that, I looked around and said, well, who are the candidates I want to work for? And Pure popped up to the top of the list. Also helped that Andrew Miller, right, who's I guess a guest host,
He's a friend of the podcast for sure. Yes.
He actually hired me at one of my former jobs.
Okay.
And I've kept up with Andrew all this time, and kind of essentially followed his career at Pure for the past, I guess it's been 6-7 years. Yeah.
What did you learn in the cloud space that's informing what you're working on right now? We haven't really talked about what we're working on right now, but with the focus on this expansion and explosion in file and object data, how does that relate to where you just came? We can say where you came from AWS, right? To come to us. So how does that intersection work? That's helped you with what you're looking to do right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. To me, what makes the cloud, besides everything you hear about, which is like, on-demand services, blah, 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 and all of that. It's really around, I consider the cloud an innovation center.
Okay.
Right? It's the type of place where you can try things, right? And you can create new things quickly. And one of the things that historically I feel like with storage companies, infrastructure companies in general, is they're the opposite of that.
Right. Yeah. They shy away from innovation, or they spend less of a percentage on revenue on innovation than others. Right.
I'll give you that one release every year that has all the features, and then one release a year that fixes all the bugs.
Yes.
And one of the things I love about Pure is we have that cycle of having basically new feature releases every single month, along with long life leases that are a little more, conventional or safe. So so now customers can say, you know what, I can essentially move at the pace of the cloud
Mhm.
and adapt and get new features quickly instead of waiting for the next calendar year or
Well, and
something
I
like
think it's
happen.
the aspects of the cloud that people loved that became associated with cloud. So we went, oh, well, we're just using the cloud. But really what they wanted was on demand,
Yeah,
quick access, spin up, spin down,
yeah,
costs that you can relatively understand,
yep,
but also getting rid of some of the day zero and day one headaches of having to buy things and unbox things.
yeah,
And so I think what you've recognized here at Pure is that we strive to provide that similar experience to customers,
yeah,
albeit with more of a traditional solution model. Although if you go into our storage as a service, then you truly are getting a,
yeah.
cloud-like experience.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we adopt, you've probably heard this phrase, fail fast.
Sure. Hmm.
Now, fail fast doesn't mean we want to fail,
Right.
right? No one actually wants to fail. But what it means is if you're kind of innovating on a regular basis, if you make if something doesn't work the way you hope, you have an opportunity to fix that,
Hmm.
right? As opposed to, I rolled this thing out, it's terrible. In 2 years, we'll get around to fixing it.
Yeah, we'll fix it. We'll fix the bugs. We'll improve it.
Yeah,
And
or a new version of it in 5 years.
yeah, which is kind of that lack of innovation,
That's right.
right? And
Right.
I hate to go back to where I used to work at, I can call out like Sun Microsystems. That
Yeah.
was a place that I loved and had amazing innovation, and then really at some point kind of lost sight
Right. Kind of peters
of
out.
some of that, and then that led to the acquisition and all that. And
Sure.
so have you been at any place where you felt, and you don't have to name it, but have you been anywhere where you kind of saw that lack of
For
innovation that
sure.
was
I mean,
frustrating?
I've been at, a, a, I would say what we call a legacy storage
Sure,
company.
sure, traditional legacy,
Yeah,
whatever you want to
that's
call it.
been
Sure.
around for 20 some years and kind of went through that cycle of very innovative and then it kind of slowed along the way until it just, became, we'll just roll out the same version but with different code name.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, or to bolt things on to something that
or
already
buy
exists,
buy
right?
someone else.
Yeah,
And
buy
bolt it
someone
on.
else, and then all of a sudden you have multiple product lines, and which one do I use? And that gets
Absolutely,
really
yep.
confusing as well. Speaking of innovation, we had you at our Accelerate conference in
Yes.
Las Vegas. I bumped into you there while managing all the fun breakouts and things
Yeah.
that we do, and the keynotes. Talk about what you enjoyed seeing there. Like, what got you really excited
Mhm.
about what we announced? And obviously it was starting with Charlie's vision of the enterprise data cloud enabled
Yeah.
by the Pure platform. But what else stood out for you as a technologist that got you really excited?
So I would say obviously the enterprise data cloud message is
Okay.
the main one, and you know, just cards on the table.
Hmm. Hmm.
I spent a while at EMC. I was there for several stints, and I was around when they first talked about the storage as a service concept
Uh-huh.
that never actually materialized. But what I saw at Accelerate that we actually have an approach of not only a vision but an actual approach to building that storage as a service idea with things like Fusion to orchestrate workflows and I think that's exciting because with the way things are the world's changing,
Hmm.
technology changing about AI, you can't afford to stand still. You gotta move fast, right? And I think our vision for the enterprise data cloud will let customers do that in a way that other companies talked about but never could really fully realize, in part because the technology just wasn't there
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah. What about the infrastructure technologist in you? Did something like a new FlashArray XL get exciting? I mean, that was one of the things I really loved about
Yeah,
this year's Accelerate, because the audience is a blend.
yeah,
We get people that are perhaps more focused on the business, and then we get our infrastructure operators and the people who are hands-on and really excited.
yep,
And we don't always pump out a bunch of hardware announcements, but we had a bunch this year, and so there was quite a bit of buzz
yeah,
around the new models, or the FlashArray ST, right, with
yeah,
the very
yeah,
fast latency. Like, there's some really cool stuff
yeah.
that we popped out.
And I would, so I actually got to staff a specific booth,
Okay,
and I was at the E booth, basically FlashArray E,
he is cool.
FlashArray Blade E, kind of a archival product.
Yeah.
And we announced the 300 terabyte, direct flash modules.
Mhm.
And I talked, some customers came up and you could see the light bulbs going off.
Yeah.
Where they're like, oh, so now I can actually use Flash for archive.
Yeah.
Which, up to now they hadn't, like, it wasn't something they could really fathom being, being affordable.
Well, it's too expensive,
too
right?
expensive.
And that's always what it is. Like, wait, Flash is too expensive.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like, look at what we've done to innovate around the tech, back to your theme of innovation here. And now you can do long-term data repositories.
And importantly, make the cost make sense,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Because now once you factor in the lower power consumption, less cooling involved, because we're packing so much into a 12U rack, for example. So that was interesting to see. It also told me that one of the things that does happen when you innovate quickly is those of us inside the company, we know what's going on.
Oh, sure.
But customers don't always know what's going on.
Not always,
right?
yeah.
So a lot of customers didn't even know, for example, that there was an E product line where the economics could work for archive. And so with the 300 terabyte DFMs, it gave us an opportunity to tell them, yeah, this platform exists to help you do that. And again, like I said, I had several customers that, the light bulb definitely went off in their head.
Yeah, well, and it's that product is interesting because there are many use. I mean, we're kind of using the word archive or long-term repository generally, but also what about places where there is just a mass explosion of unstructured data, right? I'm thinking like the success we've had recently with something like video surveillance, right? Video surveillance. Those cheaper and deeper E-family products end up just being amazing for places where you're just capturing tons and tons of video. Are they sitting and looking at all that video all the time? No, but you kind of got to hold on to it depending on what your retention is.
Or medical imaging.
Medical imaging is a perfect one for that.
Where in many cases you have to keep that around as long as the patient is alive, which obviously decades and decades worth, right? And at some point you may need to pull it up. Yeah. Right. And this pace will pay off to retrieve it more quickly than you would if you were archiving off to very slow storage of some type. So, one of the things I'm a big believer in is you built a new technology correctly, the customers will come up with the use cases.
I love that. Yes, I 100% agree. Right. And sometimes they come up with use cases that you didn't expect. That's always super exciting. They went, well, you didn't tell us to use it for this, but we actually found there's a great use case for this. And then, as a marketing person, then I go, okay, cool. Let's go build a campaign around that, because that's a really great idea.
I mean, I think it's fun when the customer does something, like you said, customer figures out a way to do something that we hadn't thought of. And suddenly we look at it and go, oh, you know what? We can actually make that a solution and even improve on it. Yeah. But we wouldn't have thought about it if this customer hadn't told us that's what they were using it for. So.
How were your interactions with customers in general, right? Being new here, people kind of, come in and go, well, how do customers respond when they come and meet with Pure people? And I know I'm after 7 or 8 years, it's generally always a pretty friendly and fun conversation. Yeah. But did you experience the same?
It was very positive. I think people are genuinely, they're genuinely excited about what we're doing. And I think the main thing I picked up was that there's a certain level of trust that customers have. Not that we are perfect, right? And I had customers that came up and said, hey, there's this feature that I've been looking for, and you guys haven't delivered it, or I have this open case that I'm still trying to get resolved. But one thing they've always appreciated is when we tell them something, they know we're not kind of sugarcoating things or making things up. We're actually telling them the way it is, whether the news is good, whether it's news they would like to hear or not. Yeah. And they appreciate that.
Yeah. And also it's an opportunity to listen a little bit too, right?
Yes.
I mean, the reason I love getting people out there and into the booths or into the sessions is we get a lot of great feedback. And increasingly, as we start ramping up user group activities and doing community things, we get to hear directly from our customers about features they want or capabilities they want or feedback around something that maybe isn't working to the level that they need. And so it's really great to have that two-way dialogue and sort of common trust. I absolutely love that. And you did a session. Remind me again. I had so many of those I was tracking. What session were you?
So it was a session
tied into.
Yeah, so I did a session, Valerie.
That's right.
That you had basically explaining the cloud to infrastructure of people.
That's right.
It was great because, we had Valerie obviously coming from Google Cloud.
Hmm.
I had spent the past 5 years at AWS. So we kind of brought that in. And then we had someone from Ford
Hmm.
who has been in doing cloud for a number of years, basically sharing their story of how they went through that journey. And then we were able to kind of piggyback and then share some of the best practices that we learned while working for those public cloud providers.
Yeah, that was a great session. I loved when I saw that deck come in for review, and for people that want to check it out, it's available at purestorage.com/resources.
Yep.
You can look at Bridging the Cloud Divide, and you can watch the replay of Ken and Valerie if you want to check that out. She's great. And then our customer guest, of course, from
Yeah.
Ford, who was speaking on that. I want to get a little bit more into really what your day job is, right? You're on this specialist team that's trying to help customers understand ways to solve the challenges of unstructured data and think about things around file and object, and that's been expanding. And I've been doing these segments, Ken, called Stat of the Episode, because they're fun jumping off
Yep.
points. And I don't need to mention the analyst or who it was, but AI also returns and searches things really quickly
Yeah.
on Google. But the stat of the episode we'll do today that we can get your perspective on is and really not surprising, unstructured data, including text, audio, video, sensor data with IoTs, AI model training. Estimates are that it now constitutes up to 90% of all data,
Yes.
which kind of blows me away, because you could go back 10 or 15 years and a lot of that data just didn't exist, right? The
Right.
world was a block world with a decent amount of file, and then the internet was kind of bringing out these unstructured sets of data. So from your view, as you're looking to work with companies around this, what do enterprises do right now? What do they need to look at? And obviously they've been following strategies for the last 5 or
Yeah.
10 years. So maybe the better question is, what are they doing wrong right now
Yeah. Yeah.
that they could fix, which involves somebody like you from
Yeah.
Tristan's team?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, Rob, it's unstructured data. Data in general
Sure.
is just growing.
grow, right.
Even block data.
Yep.
But yeah, as you said, almost all of that is unstructured data. And a lot of that has to do with, 25 years ago, you kind of knew where your data was coming from.
Yeah.
It was these database servers
Mhm.
creating, collecting customer data. But now you have data coming from IoT, you have data coming from websites and social media applications. So one of the challenges, data is coming from everywhere,
Mhm.
right? And we've got a little bit of the snake eating the tail right now, in the sense that with AI coming in, particularly generative AI, you need a lot of data to train the models, which then in turn creates more data,
Correct.
which then you need to feed back into the model so that it can learn from that. So, like I said, it's the snake eating his own tail, right? The data is going to continue to grow on it. And one of the challenges, I think, for a lot of enterprises is, how do I manage that data adequately?
Mhm.
And by that, I mean, not only like, where do I store that data, but how do I know what data type do I have, right? How do I know that when I'm feeding these data to this AI model, I'm also not sharing a whole bunch of confidential customer data that I shouldn't be?
So we get into the issues of classification,
Yeah, right,
perhaps something
exactly.
like that.
Yeah, like PII data
There we go. Right.
and stuff like that. And if you don't know what data you have, and I've talked to a lot of customers who don't know
Mhm.
what's actually in the data that they receive, then there's a risk, of course, of you breaking the law, right? Or just and obviously protecting the data, right?
Yeah.
I forgot which. I recently got a notice from yet another company saying, "Hey, we've been
gosh.
hacked," and
It's almost weekly that those
Yeah.
come out, right? I mean, it's all the time.
and part of it is hard to secure that data because there's so much of it. So if you don't know where that data is, then you don't know how to secure it properly. So I think the challenges that customers need to think through is, how do I collect that data, store it? How do I know what's in the data, and then how do I protect it adequately? And how do I do that without using 10 different solutions,
Yes.
right? How do I have possible one platform, maybe a couple of other solutions that can kind of do it all for me, so that I don't have sprawl in terms of even just the management tools.
And that's assuming that companies even know where it all exists too,
Like,
right? Because over time it sprouts up and lives in different places. So there is this whole need to
yeah,
figure out how to do aggregation. And we're not talking about migration necessarily. It's just knowing where everything is. Is it properly classified? Is it
like,
properly secured? And then from there, you can start getting into some of these things.
yeah,
But I know we hear stories about companies just rushing off because the huge AI boom is happening. And if you don't do something,
that's right.
then you're going to fall behind.
Yeah,
And so then you fall at risk of security issues or compliance issues
yeah,
if you move too quickly.
that's right.
So what's your guidance then for companies on how to do this strategically? How should they go about it without putting themselves at
Yeah.
risk?
So I think a lot of the best practices kind of follow best practices have always been there for any type of new technologies,
Yeah.
which is don't start with the technology,
I like that.
right?
Yeah.
Start with so everything comes down to technology, people, and processes, right? And sometimes our inclination, even those of us who are SAs or SCs, is
Mhm.
we want to start with the tech.
Always.
Buy this thing or build this thing, it'll solve your problems. And what you really need to do is like get a handle on what am I actually trying to accomplish?
Mhm.
What's the end state I'm getting
Start
to?
with why, right?
Yeah, and what's the processes and how do I help put the people in the right place to get that accomplished? And then pick the technology, right, that maps to that. So like an example here would be, one of the reasons I'm doing unstructured data here at Pure is because of the flash technology, for example. And one of the things that, when we talk to customers, we realize with the pace, again, things like AI analytics, things are so fast. I need to get to my data and process the data as quickly as possible. Or I need to recover my data if I have a ransomware attack, and I have to recover that as quickly as possible. So what I want to do is pick a platform that can do that.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of let me buy a platform and then try to retrofit it into
see if it works.
yeah. So I think the starting point is really like again start with the end state. What do I actually want to accomplish with all this data that I have now?
Yeah.
And the process I follow. How do I put my people in a position to succeed in using that data, and then pick the platform.
I like that. Yeah, turn it around because everybody does get really excited about the technology always and jumps off and certainly for those that are systems engineering types,
Yep.
right, in the crowd. I think my dad was one of those too. That's what you get excited about. That's what you jump off and you want to talk about all the features and all the capabilities and really there's a time for that, but that's after you start with why, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
When we first started talking about doing this episode, we were going to dig into File kind of in detail, and we had a really fun angle on it, which I didn't bring up yet, but was that you hated File earlier in your career when you actually were doing hands-on work as a system admin. I want to dig into that because File is certainly part of what you're looking after now.
Yeah.
And I'd love to tell people a story of conversion of one who hated File
That's right.
and moved to loving File. So what was your beef with File early in your career as a sysadmin? Why was it hard, or what were you frustrated with?
Yeah, so just go back in the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, I love the Wayback Machine.
So I actually started out. So I actually didn't study tech in school. I was actually the funny thing is, so Valerie and I get along really well.
Yeah.
Partly because we have a very similar background.
Neither of you really were originally technologists.
No, I
right?
actually was. I was actually a philosophy major.
Oh wow. Okay.
And kind of, but I was a philosophy major around the time of the .com boom.
Okay.
So. Surprisingly enough, there wasn't a whole lot of requests for philosophers.
Yes.
In .com companies.
Yeah.
but it was the type of space where if you could spell the word NT, you got a job as a sysadmin.
There you go.
So that's how I got into IT is through some friends who helped me get jobs learning computers, and I got an opportunity to be a sysadmin actually, and eventually on Wall Street.
Oh wow.
At Standard & Poor's,
Nice.
the rating agency. And I started out as a Unix and Windows admin.
Love the Unix.
And and I love Unix too, mainly because I would probably spend 80% of my time taking care of the Windows
Of
environment.
course.
And reasons I hated file was uh, you would it would always grow. People would always use it because it's using it for the home directory.
Yeah.
Home directory to store all kinds of things that you weren't supposed to store. And so one of my jobs at the end of every month is on a Friday night, I would have to write scripts. I would have to write scripts that would go in and check, are there a bunch of MP3s
Hmm.
back in those days.
So you're sanitizing,
Sanitizing,
the file directories that
right.
were in there.
And I have to write scripts to clean that all up, and then come back in Monday and listen to everybody yell because they've lost their
They
family
lost their
vacation
their
pictures.
Napster, their
Yeah,
Napster
the
stuff,
Napster, very much so.
and a whole nother issue.
Yeah,
right?
so a lot of weekends doing that. And then just the way file was done then is we would have a situation where we would have a file server that was 80%, 90% full. And then you had another file server sitting there that was only 20% full. But you couldn't easily readjust.
It was hard to map them, right?
Yeah, so what you end up doing is, again, you spend yet another week's Friday night doing robocopy scripts so you can just rebalance stuff. And it just became a pain. Then we don't even want to get into backups. I was in charge of backups, and we literally would have a little party anytime we actually had 100% successful backups, because that only happened once every quarter.
It's unusual, right? And there's the old adage, the old joke that I had always heard, which is, if you wanted to punish a system admin, make them test backups.
That's right.
Right? I think there's a lot of. It's funny, but it's also funny because it's true.
Yeah, it's a
right? 'Cause
pain.
it's
No,
painful.
and it's not something that anyone thinks has any value
Right.
until you need the data
Until you
back.
need it, yeah.
And then
until
they
you
yell
need a
at you.
backup. Right?
So
But that's a whole bunch of other file work as well.
Oh
right?
yeah,
when
no.
you're doing
and
that,
file
it's-
is actually the hardest thing to back up.
Yeah.
Right, because of open files and just the number of files. The amount of time I spent on weekends waiting for backups to complete, or migrating files from one place to another. So it just got me to the point where I was like, man, this is so difficult and so painful. I don't think I ever want to touch another filer or file server again.
And yet here you are.
And here I am.
and here you are. So what's changed, right? I mean, I still hear anecdotes and stories, and we evolved forward. I mean,
Yeah.
that was back around the .com time and a little bit after that. I still hear anecdotes that file is still challenging
Yes.
on some of that traditional or legacy storage technology. It takes quite a long time for admins to get it set up to get to work.
That's right.
And once you have it working, you kind of don't want to touch it, which sort of defeats the purpose of managing storage and managing data and having this
Right.
fluidity around things.
Yeah.
So that's still kind of the case with some of the tech that's out there.
For sure, I think there's a certain level of expertise. In a lot of systems, there's a level of expertise you still gotta have.
Yeah.
And to be honest, some of it will never go away, right? Because there is certain complexity with file, right? Because it's not just the store. I love the block storage guys,
Sure.
but what you got to worry about is a volume and how do I set it up, right?
Database stuff, yeah.
But when it comes to file, you gotta worry about the storage, and you gotta worry about the networking, and then it's Windows. I gotta figure out how Windows works and how Active Directory works.
Mhm.
Oh, it's Unix, so now I gotta Linux. I gotta figure out how the Linux system works. So there's just a lot more components,
There's dependencies,
dependencies
right?
in
Yeah.
there. So,
Yeah.
and so, we at Pure, what I found is we've done a great job of making that storage layer like super simple.
Yeah.
Right. When I demonstrate how things work, I explain to customers like, yeah, you don't have to worry about creating RAID groups and volumes and all that stuff. You just say, hey, I want a file server and I want a file system of this size, and we take care of everything else
That's it.
to make sure it's fully protected, right? So, and then there's complexities still in the networking side of the house, but we're trying to make that easier. So, example is FlashBlade, which is one of the scale-up platform. The fact that you can just have one data or IP interface, and you can just talk to that one interface, and we'll do the job underneath for making sure that work gets spread across all the compute. That's invaluable, as opposed to, okay, I hand you a 30 IP addresses,
Yeah.
and you got to like provision them and then make sure it's all balanced out. We kind of take that away. So, what you know, what I don't think we're where we want or need to be, but we're much further along than I thought than I've seen any other vendors do, of getting closer and closer to making everything as simple as possible.
Yeah, and that's been very deliberate, right? That we've
Yeah.
done that. I mean, we kind of started with FlashBlade, and you've had expansion of
Yep.
file capabilities into FlashArray.
Yep.
So, regardless of how customers want to attack it, and again, you used the word platform earlier, right? That's the best example of platform. Let's get out of the brand names of the products and just say we're providing capabilities
Yep.
to make it easier, but we're also abstracting all these mundane processes and coding
Yeah.
and scripts, right? And things that you need to do so that ultimately you're not managing your storage, you're managing your data. And that's
Right.
what we're trying to get down to with this and doing a
Yeah.
great job of it with File.
Yeah, and ultimately that's where Fusion comes into,
Oh, for
right?
sure.
We're still early in the journey, but
Mhm.
particularly on the file side and object side. But I mean, I envision a world where you literally configuring saying, I have an application, I need this type of service, data service for it, and we'll go out there and provision everything required to make that happen. Instead of you going through a customer going through 50 steps, to make sure that there's a file share available.
Well, think about to when you were spending nights and weekends, right?
Right.
Doing that. There's still probably admins out there spending nights and
Yeah,
weekends. They're trying to do these things manually, and
absolutely.
Fusion unlocks that and more, right?
Yeah,
Not just at a file level, but basically, go set up some presets, and we're even empowering, customers and partners to build those presets for
it's like,
themselves as well, and share those with one another, right? Create kind of an ecosystem around that,
yeah,
which gets super, super exciting. When we did pre-brief, you also talked about dispelling myths around File, and I don't know how much of that we've touched on already, but are there common myths around File that
yeah.
you feel you
Well,
want to
file particularly
dispel?
pure, right? So I
Yeah.
think so. Actually, it's maybe obviously I'm still new, 8 months
Sure,
in.
sure.
Uh, it's surprising to hear how many customers don't who are FlashArray customers who don't know you can do file and
Right.
FlashArray.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They've only associated with the the FlashBlade platform, and so there's some of that. There's
Mhm.
also, to be in all honesty, uh, this Pure has attempted file a
Mhm.
couple of different times,
Yeah.
and just like any startup at that point, when we talk about fail fast before, sometimes you try something and it doesn't work the way you hope.
A little clunky. Yeah.
And but what's happened is then some of our longtime customers go, I remember when
Mhm.
I did this, I used your file solution and it didn't work the way I expected it to. And they think that we're still using that same solution today, where it's, and I'm sure like Justin Emerson, Justin Emerson, who's a team member of mine,
Yep.
has talked about, we essentially at some point wrote the whole stack from scratch and rewrote it because to make sure that we could scale and address some of these requirements that the customers have. So for those customers, I would tell them maybe you should, if you haven't looked at file at Pure for a while, it's probably time to take a look at it again,
Yeah.
and you'll be surprised.
Well, and also look at your Purity version, right? If you're an
Yeah,
existing customer, because that's the other thing. And again, people upgrade on their own cycles and how
sure.
and when they need to. We've made it easier with
Yeah,
SSUs, with self-service upgrades. But when we look at, particularly with the release of 6.9 that
yes,
just came out on Purity and what that unlocks, not only with Fusion, but also SSUs, and then
yeah,
also even new and improved file capability, right? Again, features and capabilities that get better over time without disruption
yeah,
being one of the key messages that we have with Evergreen. That's why we encourage customers, particularly now more than ever, take a look at your Purity inversion and talk to us, and
absolutely,
let's work at finding a time and a place where you can upgrade, because you're going to have then those capabilities that make it easier for you to operate at scale.
absolutely, and based on what I've seen and heard, there were so many new capabilities added in the 6.8 train
Mm-hmm.
for FlashArray and the 4.5 line for FlashBlade that if you upgrade it to 6.9 now or to 4.6, it's almost like you've gained a whole new
Yeah.
service
Yeah.
because there's so many changes. Like
Whole new array.
like a big one that a lot of our customers care about is multi-tenancy,
Hmm.
and that's something that was introduced in that 6.8 for FlashArray and 4.5 and 4 even 4.6 for FlashBlade, where now you can segment your file services so that uh, you can have users from say different active domains have their own file server coming out of the same storage system.
Yeah, or even zero move
Yeah, another
tiering, right?
great
I
one.
just
Yep.
did a podcast a little while back on zero move tiering. Again, another really cool feature that hits the file side. Well, I love that. Great to hit those myths. I want to close kind of with our hot takes segment, right, where
Sure.
you get to reflect a little bit
Sure.
and share with people. And I'm kind of doing the same standard questions
Yeah.
on all these, but I find they're interesting. Everybody brings their own perspective, which is one. So first one is what's a trend or even more broadly an industry shift that's happening right now that you think more IT leaders or people should be paying attention to? What's something that stands out that you
Yeah.
see?
So coming from my world,
Yeah.
we is it will purposely not call the file FSAs.
Uh-huh.
We'll call the unstructured FSAs.
Okay. I like
And
it.
it's because object
Sure.
storage.
Sure.
And one of the trends that I'm seeing that people should be aware of, it's that more because of the explosion of data. It's actually it's for a lot, not all use cases, but certain number of use cases, especially in the AI space, analytics space. It's actually overwhelming the capabilities of file services.
Object is.
Well, the requirements that
Sorry,
these
the
have
requirements for it. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And object storage is a much more scalable solution in a lot of those cases. So one of the things I'm seeing is more and more customers looking at object storage to do what they used to think of using file services for.
Interesting.
So a good example is we have several customers who are Hadoop customers, and typically you use for decades now use the Hadoop file system.
Yep.
Well, those customers are seeing now that they have so much data coming in that the Hadoop file system isn't actually scaling to what they want, and so the Hadoop community actually created a tool that basically lets you use object storage as though it's Hadoop file system, but you get all the scaling of an object storage. It's called the S3A connector.
Okay.
So basically, take HDFS HDFS calls, translate into S3 API calls, and that's perfect for us on the FlashBlade because we natively have object storage and support the S3 API.
Yep.
So we've got customers who literally just swap out the HDFS, swap in the FlashBlade, and now they're getting all the performance and scalability that they didn't have before. And I think that's a trend that we're going to see more and more as, again, I think my colleague Justin has talked about NFS and SMB is in Middle Ages now.
Yeah.
And we're getting to that point where there are limitations for how they can scale. So I really see object storage as almost like a replacement for the type of workloads where large scale is needed.
I like that. That's a good one. That's really well thought out, and love that advice for people to take a look at. Let's see on this one. This has been one of my favorites. I've been hitting people, and it doesn't have to be something you did, but maybe a customer or somebody you worked with. But what's your favorite oops or kind of screw up? And I guess you were a sysad, so there's got to be something you did or something that somebody did that worked with you where it caused some issues or catastrophe.
Yeah, so I actually got a fun one. So I would say the problem was a collective the company I was working at.
Yeah.
And we had a management software, storage management software that a big customer was deploying. And it was one of the, in retrospect, it was one of those were you thinking that the customer would be your alpha customer because something broke every single week. And so every week I had to go in and put a patch in to try to fix something, which then would inevitably create another problem.
Would break something else.
So, and this went on for months and months and months. I was working with this one particular customer who's the main, who's responsible for the project. So there was one point where I put in a patch, and this patch, we promised the customer would fix everything. We put it in, it actually not only did not fix the problem, it broke something else that had been working. And I guess I showed that on my face. It's the, you know how like typically you see a customer, whether things go good or bad, you go take the customer out.
Yeah.
This is the first and only time in my career where the customer felt the need to take me out to lunch.
Because you were distraught.
Yes. So thankfully we eventually worked it out enough that, but boy, that was several more months of pain trying to get that to work.
Painful, and lingering as well. Final one is just retrospective and really going back a decade, or even go back to the start of your career when you started doing things in sys administration. What would you have liked to have known, or what would you told yourself about data management or storage out in the future? And you can't say buy NVIDIA stock, but something
Although
else.
That would be nice too.
Right?
I would say if I had to, cards on the table again, I'm not a programmer.
Sure.
I used to write some Perl scripts. That's pretty much the extent of it. But now if you look at everything you do in IT, it's about automation. Mm-hmm. It's about being able to, and in many cases, being able to do some level of programming. Yeah. Especially when it comes to the data and some of the applications that use data. Even object storage, for example, there's a lot of stuff you can do. There's even more stuff you can do with APIs if you know how to write to it. Yeah. So if I had known that, I think when I started my career, I said, learn programming. Yeah. Even if you're not going to be a programmer, because essentially you at some point you're going to have to be like a programmer. Yeah. And even today, I would tell people who are still maybe not at the beginning of their infrastructure career, but in the middle, this is the time to learn programming of some level, because it will serve you well in the future. At
least dabble in it, or at least get some of the basics down so that you kind of know and can do something on your own.
You should at least be able to write some stuff that can interrogate an API. Yeah. Right. Stuff like that.
No, it's great advice. Great advice for you out there that if you're earlier in your career and are listening or watching, then that is great. Thank you for that. Well, we're close to wrapping. We're kind of well into the second half of our year right now. What are you looking forward to? What's got you excited? I mean, don't talk about future technologies, but what has you excited about? You're coming up probably on close to a year in the role too. So.
Yeah. Oh, I think let me start personally. I would like every person who's a new employee goes through that period. I think of the first six months to a year where you go.
That's about right.
Did they make a mistake in hiring me? Yeah. So I'm looking forward to getting to the point where I feel like I'm demonstrating more value.
Great.
That's one. But I think a couple other things from a tech standpoint, I will bring up something that's future because it's announced. Mm-hmm. So I'm not, breaking any NDAs. No lawyers go after me. But Accelerate, one of the things we talked about was object storage for FlashArray.
Yes.
Making it full, true, like completely unify. And I think that's, it would be dishonest of me saying this will solve every one of your object storage problems, because it's not. That's why we also have the FlashBlade. Mm-hmm. But I'm already have customers telling me the kind of things they're looking forward to being able to do. Yeah. Because now I can do file, block, and object on the same system. And as I said earlier, the thing I get excited about is hearing what customers come up with. Yeah. The solutions they come up with because they're using our platform. So.
Well, there's so much FlashArray out there that's installed too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to get into percentages of the arrays, but our hallmark getting started out was solving database storage challenges and things in and around non-prod data with VMware and areas around that. So there's a lot of block storage out there. And so if
Right.
we keep making the arrays better to where they can do multi-protocol type of things,
Yeah.
then there's more flexibility. Obviously, we still want to point them in the direction of where FlashBlade with file or object really
Right.
makes more sense,
Yes.
more scalability, all that, more parallelism, all those
Yep.
things. But it's great now to have some of these other protocols like showing up on FA for all the FA customers
Yeah.
that are out there as well. And as you've said a couple times, they're going to figure out the right use case and
That's right.
what the right, price point is and the right, performance that
Sure.
they want, right? They'll figure it out, and we'll help them with everything they need to do. So
Yeah.
that's a great
Absolutely.
one. That's a good
Absolutely.
one. Yes, I know Karthik came to me sort of late in planning for Accelerate and said, "Can I squeeze this in?" I went, "Yeah, man, we'll figure out how to do that."
Karthik's great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. He is. Awesome. Hey, where do folks find you out there?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. I don't tweet as much as I used to.
Yeah.
But it's Ken Hui NY
Okay.
because I'm actually was a long time New Yorker.
All right.
LinkedIn, you can find me as well. And actually, we're doing a lot of events this second half of the year that I'm involved in. So,
Awesome.
so besides the tech summits, which a lot of our customers already know, prospects already know about, they also do a lot of the regions also doing something called File Day,
Okay.
where we're just mainly talking about file, right? So I'm going to be in Houston, Michigan, Vancouver, all types of places. So hopefully, if you're in those locations where you see a registration for Tech Summit or for File Day, there's a good chance I'll be there, and certainly one of my colleagues will be there. And then the way to also engage us is, talk with your account teams. If
Mhm.
you've got a file, structured data use case of some type, and you want to deep dive into how things work, how you can use our solution, you can talk to your account team. They'll bring us, myself against a member of my team on to help
Beautiful.
out.
Yeah, if you're an existing customer and want to chat with the team, figure out some
Yep.
solutions for moving forward, particularly with some of these new advancements we make in the product, that's great. And if your prospect who's listening in, tuning in, and you're curious and some of this sounds good to you, then reach out to the local account team and they will bring in the specialist for you.
So,
Beyond that, hey, storage confessions, right? We are taking your storage confessions at Pure Report at purestorage.com. Do you have an oops? Do you have an embarrassing moment? Send one of those in. We'll share it for you on a show in the future, and we won't say your name, but we will say what the example is. Hey, Ken, I appreciate this. This was
yeah,
a ton of fun. Thanks for stopping by while you were in town, and I hope it cools off in Vegas
it's not
soon
gonna,
for you.
it won't happen, but that's
It's
fine.
never going to happen,
But
but I'm at least going to wish you well that it
yes,
might.
well,
Yeah.
thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me. I've been, as they say, long time listener, first time guest.
Long time, first time. I love it.
So,
It's great.
yeah, looking forward to if we have an opportunity to do this again.
For sure. We'll have you back. And thank you out there for checking out this episode of the Pure Report. As I always say, tell a friend, tell a colleague, share the show around, and we'll keep the great guests like Ken coming on to the program. With that, we will wrap for Pure Storage. For Ken Hui, this is Rob Ludeman saying, don't look back. Something might be gaining on you.